Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. This is the Magi kicking off the soon-to-be released Season of 1 with none other than our own budget perspective. Shortly thereafter, I'll be dropping the brand new updated comprehensive codes video as well as the jump in tier list breakdown and talking about all the very best budget decks that you should be focused on as a free-to-play player. Of course, we're going to talk about the value behind the Mastery Pass and bring you the very best in limited content for Jump In, Sealed, and Draft, including the top 3 draft archetypes, your top draft performers, as well as a season review coming up at the end. And along the way, of course, we're going to be bringing you midweek magic every single week. This season of 1 is brought to you in part by D's Nuts, which is just my comical attempt to say, if you haven't subscribed yet, you might have a screw loose. So go ahead and subscribe, and let's get your collection tight. Now, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah, right. All right, so I'd like to start the conversation about Phyrexia All Will Be One by covering the mechanics that you are going to be seeing in the set. And I think the one that is going to define this set as people look back on it, not just over the next couple months, but the next couple of years and long after, of course, is going to be the Poison Trifecta. This, of course, is 3 separate mechanics, technically speaking, but there's so much interaction and so much overlap, it really makes more sense to talk about them all at once. In case you don't know, poison is a counter that players receive, not any other type of permanent, just players. And a player that has 10 or more poison counters loses the game, just as if they had no life left. Toxic is a brand new mechanic, primarily for creatures, and it is the most recent and newest in a long line of trying to get poison-based creatures right. A creature that has Toxic will apply poison counters in some quantity at the same time that they apply damage to players. It's not necessarily the same quantity as the damage. It is defined by the toxic number of that creature. Corrupted is an adjacent mechanic. There are going to be spells and effects and permanents that get better when your opponent is corrupted, which is a truncated way of saying they have 3 or more poison counters at this time. All of these mechanics go together. You are going to see these primarily in your green, white, and black decks, although they are supported and somewhat covered in virtually every color combination out there. This is the mechanical subset that will define this set. Next up, I think it'd be pretty slick to talk about one of the new self-contained mechanics for the set, oil counters. Basically, this is just a fancy name that they're throwing on a tracking counter that a number of cards use. Some cards put oil counters on themselves and then use those counters for various effects. Other cards care about how many permanents you control with oil counters, and still others move oil counters around. You get a variety of different effects here. And while I think there are a number of cards built around oil counters which are going to be role fillers, both in limited and in standard, I think this mechanic is a little too self-contained to have any long-term widespread impact in either limited or standard. This next mechanic is going to have your counters popping up more prolifically than bunnies in the springtime in the year of the rabbit. Proliferate is a returning mechanic, and for those who have not experienced this before, basically for any number of players and or permanents with counters on them, you can add 1 additional counter of each type. And this is not something you get to pick or choose. If a permanent has more than one type of counter, you do both of them or you do none of them. That is just how this goes. This is going to be more of a support mechanic for those previously mentioned poison base, oil base mechanics going on. Unfortunately, there is just not enough self-contained synergy here to really make this its own thing. It's always going to be playing second fiddle to some other mechanic. And for that reason, this is going to be a little less prolific, so to speak, in both standard and limited. And last up in the mechanics, we've got the Rebellious for Mirrodin. And that's right, it is correctly typed out and said with the exclamation point. So get hype, people, for Mirrodin. At any rate, these are a series of equipment artifacts that generate and attach to their own rebel token as they enter play. This is another one of those mechanics that I think is destined to play a support role, and I think it will do that very widely, very well. I know this is present in 4, if not all 5 of the color options. But outside of red, white, equipment matters in limited, I just don't think this is going to be a strong enough source for any sort of constructed deck. More and more, I think this is going to be a support piece, but a good one at that, and something you will probably see in a lot of decks as 1 and 2 ofs. Overall, Phyrexia All Will Be One is giving us budget players a lot of lower rarity toys. Really, to find a set that even comes close to this as far as high quality commons and uncommons, you'd have to go back to the most recent Kamigawa set. It is very unusual to see a density and quality of commons and uncommons coming to us in a set like this. There is just a ton of goodies here, and as such, you're going to want to make sure that you are very aggressively building your collection in this, with eye on, in particular, those uncommons. Regardless of where you are in your draft journey and how much your win rate is and things like that, make sure that you're doing enough drafting to kind of coast into that uncommon playset once you start opening your packs. Otherwise, cards that don't look important yet are eventually going to rise in prominence, and if you don't have them, that means you're going to be spending wild cards on them at some point in the future. For example, white has 2 nice low rarity pieces of enchantment-based removal. Planar Disruption is what I would pretty reasonably call a strictly better pacifism. For 1 and a white, this enchantment aura allows you to enchant an artifact, creature, or planeswalker. Enchanted permanent cannot attack or block, and its activated abilities cannot be activated. So basically, yeah, you can shut down any utility artifact, creatures, or planeswalkers with this common spell. About the only thing a creature is going to be able to do with a planar disruption on it is crew vehicles. And of course, when Kamigawa eventually rotates come this fall, the utility around crewing vehicles is going to drop off pretty significantly for the foreseeable future. Similarly, an enchantment aura ossification, also for 1 mana and a white. When ossification ETBs, exile target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls until ossification leaves the battlefield. This, of course, is an enchantment targeting a basic land you control. So unless they are running straight enchantment or land removal for specifically basic lands, they're going to have a hard time getting their piece back. And again, these are both examples of lower rarity white removal that we're seeing as kind of cutting edge for this new set. Similarly, red looks to be on the prowl with offerings like Blazing Crescendo for 2 mana instant. Target creature gets +3/+1 until end of turn. And you get to exile the top card of your library until end of your next turn. You may play that card. This looks like it will very easily find its way into the Prowess decks, if not immediately, certainly come a rotation. Sawblade Scamp is one of those oil-based role fillers that I mentioned earlier. For 1 mana, you get a 1/1 Phyrexian Hasty Beast creature. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on Sawblade Scamp. Tap, remove an oil counter, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Again, it fits very nicely into any kind of Spells Matter, possibly Prowess-based deck, and a card that I'm sure as a common and a 1/1 haste creature for 1, we're going to see a good bit of, possibly in a number of red builds. And you can be sure that blue and black got their respective role fillers of control and removal at lower rarities, but there just really wasn't anything that I thought of as particularly surprising or pushed in overall value. Green, however, appears to be getting its groove back. With a number of uncommons here. Infectious Bite for 1, a lovely little fight spell that also gives your opponent a poison counter regardless of how the fight turns out. And Tyvar's Stand, another instant, X and a green, adds +X/+X to a creature, which also gains hexproof and indestructible. Mark my words, you're going to be upset more than once this season because your opponent cast this for 0x and still managed to ruin your day. And now let's take just a momentary break from card specifics and talk about budgeting for Phyrexia All Will Be One. What you're seeing on screen is a budget that I have recently revised and what I will personally be using for this season. I plan to do approximately 7 jump-in events, a total of 6 drafts, 5 of which of those will be quick drafts. The other will be a token-funded premier draft from last season's Mastery Pass. And of course, I plan on purchasing approximately 49 packs. The exact number of packs that I plan on buying is subject to change depending upon what they end up doing when they reset or ultimately roll over those golden packs metrics from one season to the other. They haven't specifically said what they're going to do, and for the 49, I am assuming they are always going to reset us back to 1 pack. And, well, I might be wrong on that. But a couple of packs, one way or the other, I don't think is going to make or break anyone out there's budget. Now, this smaller number of drafts for the season does mean that affording the Mastery Pass as a free-to-play player is going to be a little more skill-intensive. And if you're concerned about that, definitely check out my recent video, When to Stop Drafting a Set. Towards the end of that video, I go into several very specific options on how to better afford that Mastery Pass while still remaining 100% free to play. And now let's get back to the cards. In this case, specifically, some reprints that are going to be popping up in Phyrexia All Is One. We've got a total of 5 commons that might be lurking in the deep recesses of your collection. I know I have more copies than I can count of Duress, and this is one you might want to avoid completely because not only are you very likely to get a playset already, but it really is undervalued in limited. Prophetic Prism and Terramorphic Expanse, on the other hand, while you may already own these do represent some significant potential fixing in the limited environment. Thrill of Possibilities is a possible enabler of any of those red-based spell decks, and of course, a Titanic Growth is a pretty significant combat trick when it comes to green. So while you may already have some of these and you are almost certain to get them from opening packs, there might be reasons that at least 4 out of these 5s might be added to your draft decks. Next up, I'd like to talk about what I think is going to be one of the more tricksy cards coming to us in the new 1 set. That is Gleeful Demolition, a single red mana sorcery uncommon that states, destroy target artifact. If you controlled that artifact, create 3 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens. The lovely thing about this is if you were to combine this with one of the new indestructible artifact lands, and I say new because they're fairly new to Arena, like Drossforge Bridge, not only do you get to keep your land because it's indestructible, but you just profit 3 Phyrexian Goblin creature tokens. And getting 3 1/1s for a single red mana is a pretty good payoff. Similarly, in Historic, if you run the Gleeful Demolition in tangent to Liquid Metal Coating, a 2 mana artifact uncommon that came to us as part of the Retro Frame artifacts in Brothers War, you can use Gleeful Demolition to destroy literally anything, because Liquid Metal Coating for a simple tap and target permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. So you can use Demolition to destroy anything from lands, planeswalkers, and friendships. So, keep that in mind. And while we're talking about cool things in this set, we really need to talk about planeswalkers, because this set has 10 of them. And just to put that in perspective for some of the newer players, a typical set during the Arena era of Magic has contained 3 planeswalkers. So this is just a huge addition. There's 5 at Rare, there's 5 at Mythic, and since we as free-to-play players don't have a lot of control over what rares and mythics find their way into our collections outside of wildcard use, I'm really going to hold off evaluations on these until we have had some time to play with these cards and evaluate them inside of a living meta. Otherwise, I'm really just giving blind speculation here. And when it comes to wildcards, we need to be more conservative than wild speculation. At the other end of the feast-famine spectrum, let's talk about legendary creatures in this set. While there are a smattering at Rare and Mythic, there are no uncommon legendary creatures in this set. And when it comes to any sort of Brawl applications, there's really only 2 that I'm interested in. The first, and I'm going to pronounce this, Karamonix the Rat King. Legendary creature Phyrexian rat for 1 and 2 black mana, a 3/3 with Toxic 1. Other rats you control have Toxic 1. When it ETBs, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of rat cards from among them and put the reveal cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And mostly I am thinking this is an alternative commander for the Rat Colony deck. I do still think the Mirrodin is the better commander option, mostly because of its ability to not just draw you cards out of your library, but make rat tokens. Certainly the new Rat King could be part of your 99 in that deck. or again as an alternative for a free-to-play player trying to put together that deck for as few wildcards as possible. On a similar note, there are at least 2 other decent rats in this set, one at common and one uncommon, both in black. I am very curious to see if I might be given the opportunity to try and pull together the rat deck in limited, although I do concede right up front that as both the common and uncommon rat are pretty playable even outside of their rat creature type, it might be difficult to do so. I think this would almost certainly have to be a pack 1, pick 1, and certainly no later than pack 2, and maybe pick 1, pick 2. Otherwise, you just would not have enough time to assemble enough rats, and there's going to be other players vying for those cards, even that didn't get the Rat King. The only other legend that I'm interested in this set for me personally is a Malcator Purity Overseer at 3 mana. This 1/1 looks to be a very interesting commander for an Artifacts Matter / Goblin Tribal deck over in probably Historic Brawl. I'm not sure that I am going to make time to go over this particular deck option, so if it's something that you're interested in seeing, make sure to comment down below and let me know. Otherwise, it may not make the schedule. I think we can all rest assured that this larger number of walkers and much lesser degree of legendary creatures is not what we should expect from future sets moving forward. The Vorthos Kingpins out there tell me that we can expect really the exact opposite. More legendary creatures and less planeswalkers moving forward. And apparently this all has something to do with the Phyrexian version of the World Tree, interconnecting the planes and making it possible for non-walkers to move from one plane to the other. And that is probably something we are going to start seeing from the legendary creatures in future sets. Of course, what's really all going on here is Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro making a marketing decision. They have come to the realization that no one really buys Planeswalker decks. And in fact, I think they're officially discontinued at this point. And that everyone loves Commander. So they're going to go all in on Legends and make Planeswalkers less relevant to the overall story. And speaking of things coming to Arena, of course, we will have the Phyrexia All Will Be One Alchemy update dropping in probably 5 or 6 weeks if they follow their prior schedule criteria. And that, of course, will have its own budget perspective reaction video and recommendations on how to best approach alchemy for you as an individual player. And of course, the next major standard release will be March of the Machines. That is scheduled to drop on Arena, I believe, on April 18th. There is also some discussion about a companion set for this, but as far as I can tell at this point, that is going to be a paper-only drop for the secondary accompaniment. March of the Machines will be a pretty standard set, all puns intended. And let's not forget, we have the direct to Eternal release, Shadows over Innistrad Remastered, that's going to come out sometime, and I quote, the first half of 2023. And we're starting to close in on that pretty quickly as we're ending January at the time of recording here, and probably early February by the time this gets released. Shadows over Innistrad, I fully expect to be a draftable set, although it would not surprise me if this is only offered to us as a premium draft and not a quick draft option. I'd be very happy to be wrong about that. And the last thing that I think should be on your immediate radar is the Lord of the Rings set coming out sometime in the third quarter of 2023. And unfortunately, I don't know enough about Hasbro, much less Wizards of the Coast corporate calendars, to know exactly when that is. We have been told that this set is going to be the same on Arena as it is in paper, that there's not going to be any alchemy rebalancing shenanigans the way they did with Baldur's Gate. We've also been told that this will be fully draftable and will have its own mastery. I don't think this is going to be a premiere only offering. I do think we will have a quick draft offering here. And my guess is that this is probably going to be the summer set and maybe drop somewhere in June. But don't hold me to that just yet because, well, I'm guessing on a lot of those details because they just really haven't told us much yet. And folks, before you go, make sure you've subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on a thing. Because I know I can't change the Magic economy all by myself, but I think we can.